So I will talk about the Harvest Africa program, but I'll give you a little bit of context, like where it comes from, and I've shared some of the programs that some of the partners, some of the things that we're really interested in, and why it's a really fascinating time to be working on Earth observations, machine learning, and data science, and working on agriculture and food security. The basis of it, there's hundreds of thousands of satellites collecting data about the Earth. It's been happening for a really long time. And we're in this really amazing space because we can't say we don't have data. There are data sets that are missing, but we have foundational data sets from which we can understand a little bit about what's going on, and maybe a little bit more than we did before. I skipped this one. So there's, a massive amount of satellites collecting data. So we can't say we don't have enough data. And the data sets are diverse. So we're looking at temperature, rainfall, soil moisture, and some of the others that you have seen. And in combination, when you put all of these together, there's quite a lot of things that you can study. One that we use a lot for agriculture monitoring is what we call NDVI. This is supposed to be a graphic that's not working, but basically just shows how the Earth changes throughout the year by looking at vegetation transitions. If you think about our crop seasons, plants up, a farmer sows their seeds, plants grow up and then they die. And so you can see this with these data sets, and that's kind of the basis of a lot of the work that we do. And we are in this fantastic era in terms of an explosion in remote sensing data sets. All the satellites are collecting really useful data in different ways. We have different bands that we didn't have access to at a much higher resolution. There's an explosion and interest from machine learning in advancing and using, deep learning techniques for extracting information basically from these data sets. And the cloud, that's what this is supposed to depict, has kind of, changed a lot of things. When I did my PhD, being able to download and analyze data, even though I did it at University of Maryland, one of the leading departments in geographical sciences and remote sensing, it still did take a while. I needed to have a really good computer. And now the possibilities as we're sitting here, I could analyze data that I would not have been able to analyze at the University of Maryland 5 years ago without needing, some extra support and access to NASA resources. And so all of that opens up these opportunities to study these things that are really important. So I extracted this graphic. It comes from a really, really big one where you can't see anything. So I had to kind of narrow down to the things that I think are interesting. There are all these things happening in different sectors that are really critical, that we can monitor, that we can track, that we can provide intelligence about what's going on, what might happen. We can start thinking about modeling, but we're modeling it not only in time, but in space. So we have details, a 10 meter resolution across places where we're not able to look before. So you did see the rain gauge network or the the water sensors distribution. There are places where there are none, and so you have nothing to begin with. And this is where remote sensing can help us start to think. In addition to using, advanced techniques of if you have some examples of what this looks like, you could try and learn from satellite data what it looks like in another place. It doesn't work out really well, as Mary Jane was saying, that using a model developed for the UK would not work for forecasting thunderstorms in South Africa. So it's the same even for agriculture. But I'm going to show you some quick examples of other applications for satellite remote sensing that are important for climate change. So we can look at coastal systems, how they're changing. We can look at coming from a data set of buildings combined with rainfall, flood forecasting. You can look at, for example, flooding risks in specific areas. Having these types of data sets. So for example, having this example, the buildings up on the top is from Botswana. Imagine combining that with the data sets of where the population is and combining it with the probability that there might be a drought. So you can kind of think forward that in 10 years, if it rains this much will be flooded. Maybe you can plan a little bit better. You can try to think about maybe using better materials, as we've learned from yesterday, or maybe not investing all your infrastructure in a place that is probably going to disappear in a couple of years. can be used for forest monitoring. This is one of the most common examples. You can look at near real time, not like immediately, but within a few weeks or a few days, you can know that maybe some illegal forest activity is ongoing, or you can know to what extent you're losing the forest and why you're losing it. And so we can see those types of patterns. I think an example of this was shown, but this is being able to track water and how much water we have available, how that might impact on agriculture is something that we can also do with satellite remote sensing. And so I'm going to start talking about the things that I really know and do. This is an example of what crops look like from satellite data from different landscapes. We have from the US in the middle, top left. You have much larger fields. The ones with the circles are irrigated. We can look at very complex, very small, very heterogeneous landscapes to the top right, for example, an example from Kenya. Other irrigated agriculture in the bottom, maybe your bottom left, I guess. And this is really interesting because it means we can use the same eyes to look everywhere. But we do need to use different techniques, sometimes additional data sets. We need to understand the context in order to be able to interpret what we're doing. And this is sort of the basis of the Harvest program. So utilizing the investments from NASA and satellite systems and all the research that has been done to advance land use, land cover change monitoring, and translating that and using that for agriculture monitoring and going beyond just putting up data sets, but making them available to the people that need them. And this is what the Harvest program is about. I also work, I'm funded through the NASA Severe program, which is NASA's capacity building program, with a focus on getting the tools and instruments and knowledge that US scientists are working on into organizations that would need them. The center they do this through hubs, and there's a hub here in Nairobi called RCMRD. And on that program, I work as the Agriculture and Food Security thematic lead. So food security, these are the different components, but from the work that we do primarily, we're looking at availability, access, and possibly stability, because stability is a combination of availability and access. And so based off of this, in order to, if you think about availability, how much might be produced impacts on how much food will be available. So a farmer might want to know when to plant, how their plants might perform. They might want to know what the potential risks to their fields are. They might want to know, should I continue planting maize going forward? And there's so many things, social, economic, and climate. So will maize be suitable here 10 years from now? Will people still be eating maize? That's a whole different story, but something that's really important. A policymaker might want to know the same exact things, but from a broader perspective, like should we be investing in maize inputs, or should we be investing in something else? Should we be bringing irrigation in this particular area, or is it not worth it? And what we work on can help, provide some answers or some sort of direction with the databases. So the Africa program under NASA Harvest, we have these sort of broad focus areas. One, improving the monitoring systems. So all those data sets, usually very complicated to deal with. So we work on making it easy for end user to analyze, look at what's happening in their region. We work on advancing the methods. So we might have really fancy platforms that are based on crappy data. So we try to address that, improve the data sets to the level that is relevant for that particular end user. We also work on capacity. So we don't want to be the ones doing the jobs of the analysts at the Ministry of Agriculture. So we work to ensure that, what we're doing is complementary, but as well as useful for them. And that if it's something they really want, they can transition and use it. And then, of course, partnerships. I call this the area that we work on, because partnerships evolve and you can do different things depending on what the partner wants. So that's pretty critical. So I'll just show some examples. This is sort of a very broad overview of the combinations of different things. So it's too complicated. You have to look at it in a close screen to really see like the whole setup. Satellites, analyze them, get products, put them in a place where they can be visualized, make it easy for someone to get insights, summaries that then they put in these reports that's all the way at the top. So I'm going to give an example from one crop, maize. So you might want to know, maize is really important. We're in Kenya. So ugali is really critical. It's food security. It is food. Without ugali, we have a problem in Kenya. So you might want to know where it is growing and how it is growing, right? So where we need a cropland map crop type map where maize is currently growing. So we don't assume where it's flooded or where it's dry there is maize, because that could be really misleading. So we work on developing those types of products. How it is growing, is it productive, and how has it been growing over time? So if you've been growing maize in central Kenya for the last 20 years, same inputs or more inputs, is it even worth it? Or do we need to do something different? And we need to know threats. So there are real threats to your agriculture. So you want to be able to track all of those things. And so I'm going to show now some examples of systems. So the top right is a global agriculture monitoring system. You can access multiple data sets. You can get out really simple, straightforward graphics of what's going on in a specific area. And countries, multiple countries, it's a global system you can access, it's open. This is an example of like what you could look at. This is NDVI anomaly, the normalized vegetation index, which is everywhere that's red, we have problems. In this case, like if you think about it like a traffic light. An example for Kenya from a couple of weeks ago, this is what Kenya looked like. So it is a little bit misleading because you're just looking at everything, right? Everything is brown and yellow. So when you use a maize mask, you know what areas where maize is growing might be in serious trouble. In addition to visualizations, we also invest a lot in making the data useful and intuitive. So if crop conditions are bad, as I think as an example I was given before, in a place where you import food from, this helps you understand like what might unfold in the coming weeks. So this is like a way of looking at markets, trade, crop conditions, and how they work together. I have 2 minutes, all right. And then this is an example of utilizing one of those systems for agriculture monitoring. Work that we have done with multiple countries in Africa utilizing those systems. So another example I wanted to show is how we're utilizing machine learning to fill in those data gaps using, cropland mapping, crop type mapping, field boundaries. So we work on many different things. I wanted to showcase this example. Joyce is working on pest detection. She's based at Makerere, and she's one of our partners. I don't know if I still have 2 minutes or nothing, but we are basically working on making very complicated data sets accessible to end users. And I have like some examples. I'll try to go really quickly. One thing I wanted to really show is capacity development. So we work not only at national level with analysts who want to access and utilize this data, but also working with extension agents and people at multiple levels, from students to extension agents. And we work in multiple countries. In Mali, we're going to start working in Senegal, in Uganda, in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Rwanda. And working with, it's not that we do stuff about countries, but we work with the partners in those countries to do the work with them. Some of our partners, we have many, and this is really critical because not everybody can do everything. So they're data contributors, they're analysts, they're people who can support data collection, but they're people who give you context and why you're doing what you're doing. And I think I should be out of time. So this is what we want to do more of. Thank you.